Good evening all, and welcome. It would appear that the ghosts have ramped up their activity, as here they come to spook you for tonight's stories. So get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. When I was a kid, I used to go visit my uncle's lodge in the school holidays. It was on this huge property and backed onto the edge of bushland. So my brother and I always had a whole bunch of stuff to do to keep us occupied. I remember I was with my dog one day playing near an empty creek when he suddenly just took off into the trees. Everyone else had gone into town and my dad was inside asleep. So I was pretty much alone and decided to go after him. He was much quicker than I and got lost fairly quickly. I was starting to get a bit upset because I couldn't find my dog and I had no idea where I was, so I turned around from where I thought I came from and tried to run back to get my dad so he could help me find him. From what I remember, I tripped over a tree root or something and fell down this embankment. I must have hit my head on something because I woke up at the bottom of this small gully, not knowing how I got there. Everything was still a bit fuzzy. What actually woke me up was my dog licking my face. He was lying down right next to me. How he found me, I don't know, but I was really happy to see him. But then he started barking, but it was a bark I hadn't really heard him do before, as he was still lying flat on his stomach. That's the strange thing I remember about this part. A really strange lying down grumble sort of bark. It made me scared a bit. I turned to see what he was looking at, and there was a guy standing there. I remember thinking he had a really faded cowboy hat thing on that had a chunk missing on the side. "Hey kid, you had a pretty bad fall, but you should be alright. Let me get you back to your home," he said in this really deep voice. Then he walked over to me, picked me up, grabbed my hand, and we started walking back through the bush. The two things I remember from that walk were holding his gloves, which I thought was weird because it was the middle of summer and really hot at the time. The other one was my dog was walking too close to me. I was pretty much tripping the whole way back because he kept smacking into the side of my leg on the return. The guy didn't say anything though. In fact, I don't actually remember him saying anything at all apart from the first time he spoke. I don't think we walked for that long because we reached the creek bed really quickly, and I could hear my name being called out from my dad saying it was dinner. I started to run up to the house and remembered I forgot to thank the guy from getting me here, so I turned to yell, "Thanks, mister." But he was already gone. I just figured he was in a hurry or something. A few days later, I was in the supermarket with my mum. It was one of those small country town ones that kind of sell everything, and everyone knows everyone else there. So I'm kind of just wandering around, and there's this photo up of a guy on a wall in a cowboy hat with a big chunk missing in the side. It was the guy who helped me in the woods. I wanted to thank him or something for helping me before, so I asked the person working there who he was. Turns out he was the original owner of the store around 30 years ago, but died in a freak accident in the woods where my dog and I apparently were, where he used to grow vegetables back for the store, himself in the middle of the woods. I don't know why, I guess the soil must be more fertile or something. He went one day to see how they were growing when a really bad storm started up. He was apparently trying to get back, but his dog, who always went with him, fell down a really steep embankment into a gully, so this guy went after it. While he was down there, a branch broke off a tree and hit him, breaking his back. They didn't find him for weeks later. His dog was also found with him by his side. It died of starvation. That's how I found out about Mr. Rogerson anyway. This past summer, after a Friday night dinner, My friends and I decided we wanted to go ghost hunting instead of drinking. We go to a cliff/lookout situated a 15-minute drive between two cities that a lot of tourists went to during the daytime for the spectacular view it gave of the city. However, during the night, a much darker history is told among locals. A long time ago, an epic battle took place, which ended in warriors being pushed off a cliff during their last stand. A lot of ghosts reside in this particular area, all with different legends surrounding them. Since it was nighttime, no one was around. It was pretty dark, only a few lights in the entire parking lot. A few girls and I were freaking out, refusing to leave our friend's van as the rest of them opened the doors to get out. As soon as the door opened, I noticed how the parking lot seemed still. No wind at all. Nothing was moving. After 2 minutes inside the car, I realized we were setting ourselves up for a terrible horror movie by dividing the groups, so I coaxed the other girls in the car to get out and follow the guys. Before the entire group made our way through the parking lot, another car pulled up. Their headlights were blinding in the darkness. Out came a man, woman, and 3 teenaged girls. At first, we were wary of them, but after a few jokes, they revealed that they were a local family spending their night ghost hunting at a famous haunted location. We welcomed the idea of having more people join us, especially since they were loud. The man had a big camera hung around his neck and took pictures frequently as we walked to the lookout. The woman, his wife, even showed us pictures they took at other locations with some ambiguous shapes in them. On the way up, one of the girls screamed, claiming to have seen something long and white out of the corner of her eye. We were all unnerved but convinced it was her imagination in order to make it to the other lookout. Nothing happened at the lookout, nothing special anyway. And on our way back down, one of the girls took the man's camera and started snapping pictures. Since it was nighttime, each picture click was quickly followed by a freakishly bright light, and this chick was going crazy with the pictures. She took pictures of almost everything around us on every second on the way down. When we reached the parking lot, our group went ahead towards our car on the opposite side, and the family went on their way. We exchanged goodbyes and the girl decided to take a picture of us. We parted ways to our vehicle, as the family's car was parked closer to the lookout, and I turned to wave goodbye to the family. A man was getting in the car, but the woman and the 2 girls waved back to me. The 3rd girl was looking down, fiddling with the camera to turn it on. I turned back to the group and reached my hand out to open the door when I heard a shrill scream, followed by a silence pierce through the lot, followed by the sound of the family car speeding away. We promptly shoved ourselves into the car as quickly as we could and slammed all the doors, and I almost lost my shoe, while our driver started the car and we sped away from the lookout. After a few minutes of arguing, our group concluded it had to be the girl, or something she saw on the camera. But the first picture she would have seen would have been the one of our group. In the fall of 2013, I had begun to feel a presence in my home. Of course, feeling a presence is very vague and doesn't prove much, but I just had the feeling that I wasn't alone. The feeling wasn't negative though, and it didn't scare me. If anything, it felt like someone I knew. It felt familiar, comfortable, and safe. One night I was getting ready for bed, and I felt that presence again. I brushed it off, feeling hyper-aware of the shadows around me. Once more I was in bed and was trying to fall asleep. I was startled by the sensation that someone had just climbed into bed beside me. The bed shifted, as if under someone's weight, but no one was there. Not knowing what to do about it, I simply pulled up the covers, rolled over, and went to bed. Every now and then, I'd also catch the outline of a person or movement in the corner of my eye, disappearing immediately, though that never bothered me much because it could have been anything. It was probably just a trick of the light, or my imagination creating something out of a shadow, so I never thought much about those experiences as they could be explained away easily. But I guess it might be worth mentioning now. My boyfriend at the time was also beginning to spend a lot more time at my place. Sure enough, he began to feel this presence too, which made me feel like less of a crazy person, because he was almost validating for me that something could actually have been going on. I never told him about these experiences either, knowing that he was a wimp when it came to the paranormal, and I actually liked having him around so often. The difference for him, though, was that the feeling wasn't so comfortable. It freaked him out and he felt unwelcome and uneasy. Not wanting to freak him out further, though, I chose not to express that I was feeling a presence too. My way of dealing with things, paranormal or not, is to pretend they do not exist, to ignore it until it goes away, and I try to tell him to do the same. It did make me curious why our impressions of whatever was present were so different though, why he was so afraid of it, and why was I comforted by it. Perhaps I am a weirdo after all. Quite a bit of time goes by, and I'm nearing the end of the semester. It's our friend's birthday, and a bunch of us are going out, but I ended up deciding to stay back to complete an assignment I had due at midnight. I finished my essay with 5 minutes to spare before the deadline, and as I breathe a sigh of relief after typing like a maniac, fueled entirely by coffee and adrenaline, I notice a text from my boyfriend. He's just letting me know that he'll be staying at our friend's place tonight, but that he'll probably need a ride home in the morning. Knowing this, I lock the doors and get ready for bed. Nothing is strange, nothing is out of the ordinary, and I fall asleep effortlessly. I'm gently awoken by the feeling of someone caressing my hip. The hand feels like my boyfriend's hand, large and meaty, so I assume it's him. I smile and let out a satisfied sound as I feel his hand. I enjoy the sensation with my eyes, laying on my left side, and I feel calm, loved and protected, and happy that my boyfriend decided to skip out on the party and come home with me. That's when I open my eyes. It's too dark to see any details, but there's a window behind him and the light coming in from the street lamps outside make his silhouette visible. It looks like my boyfriend. The silhouette is tall, large, with broad shoulders, but when I look at him, he takes his hand away. I pat the empty space on the bed between him and me and say, "Come to bed." The way that his head and shoulders are positioned, I can tell he's looking directly at me, but he doesn't respond. He stands up slowly and begins walking around the bed towards the door. As he's walking, I sit up on the bed and ask, "What are you doing? Come to bed." He stops at my door and turns to look at me. I'm confused and a little frustrated with him. Speak, I think. I begin to crawl to the foot of my bed towards him as I say, "Where are you going?" He goes into the hallway. Within a fraction of a second later, I'm in the hallway too, but I'm completely alone. I suddenly stop, startled that no one was in front of me, and so extremely confused. For starters, the hallway is too long for anyone to have walked down it in the time it took me to turn the corner. My floors are creaky as hell, and there's no way anyone could have walked down it without a sound. It just couldn't happen. I turn on the hallway light before going into the washroom, still hoping to see my boyfriend. But when I turn on the light, I find that it's empty. I check every single room in the condo, turning on every light, and came to the realization that I was completely alone. I sat on my couch in silence for a little while, thinking about what had happened. Did I just see a ghost? Did I hallucinate the whole thing? I even started researching hypnopompic state, where someone wakes up during the REM sleep cycle, but it described people speaking incoherently and falling back to sleep or hallucinating something for a few seconds. It's a common trait, that sleepers who experience this are usually confused and sleepy. But I wasn't. I was wide awake, having a much longer experience than documented during hypnopompia, even continuing to hallucinate after getting up and walking. I stopped questioning and figured that it didn't matter anyway. Whatever happened, happened. I wasn't going to dwell on it. I did question why I felt so calm though. I was confused. I always thought that if I'd seen a ghost face to face, I'd be more afraid. Throughout the experience, I just felt comforted, happy, and protected. I couldn't stress enough how okay I felt. A week or two go by, and I hadn't even thought about the event, nor had I mentioned it to anyone. It passed off as a hallucination in my mind and moved on, until one night my boyfriend and I decided to binge some Netflix. We set up the mattress in the living room and set it down in between the couch and the TV, and we eventually fell asleep there. When I awoke, I looked around and saw my boyfriend sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee. He was already looking at me. He smiled and said good morning, and I smiled, but something about him seemed really off. His body language read a little tense to me. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He just shrugged, and the corner of his mouth curled into a half smile, as if he was trying to reassure me that he was okay, just not super okay. "It was just some sleep paralysis again. It's just really creepy, that's all. I can't seem to shake it off," he replied. Sleep paralysis was pretty common for him. He'd have it every few months. He was used to it, but it was always unnerving for him, especially when he'd hallucinate at the same time. "Want to tell me about it?" I asked, rolling over towards him. He tilted his head and described it to me. He said he'd fallen asleep on the couch a little after I did, and awoke to find himself completely paralyzed. He thought, "Ugh, not this again." But he was horrified to see, when he looked towards me, a shadow-like figure of a man sitting on the mattress beside me. I immediately got chills, but refrained from interrupting him. He said he was watching me sleep slowly and using his hand to caress my hip. Normally I don't fight when I get sleep paralysis like I have done so often. I know it's best to just try and fall back asleep, but it was touching you, and that messed me up, he told me. He tried to scream at the top of his lungs to warn me or wake me up, but of course no sound came out. He thrashed his limbs about and tried to roll off the couch onto the mattress beside me, but no movement came. The figure even looked at him, like it found it funny how desperate he was trying to protect me, almost laughing at how powerless he was. Eventually it went away, and my boyfriend was able to fall back asleep, but I was a little too shaken to say the least. I sat in silence, sitting up beside him at this point, since the story was too rousing to listen to it laying down. I bit my lip as I toyed with the idea of telling him my experience, but eventually I did. I told him everything that I had been experiencing, the hallucinations I had, and how I was trying to ignore it all. He just sat there in silence after I told him, but after a little while he said, "That's messed up." I told him how it never really scared me though, that it felt safe to me, comforting even, but he just thought that was weird. Eventually, we started referring to it as my ghost boyfriend, and it became an inside joke. Neither of us had any weird experiences like that again, but we did feel the same presence every so often, and we would ignore it every time. A few months had passed, and I was now at the end of my winter 2014 semester. I had left my city to go back home, because my Uncle Norm had passed away. The wake was taking place all weekend, and the funeral would be on Monday morning. On top of this, I had a real hard ass of a professor who literally would not give me an extension so that I could attend the funeral. So I had no choice but to pull an all-nighter and work around the clock to get my end-of-term assignment done. On Monday morning, my family left to the funeral parlor, as I had finally finished the assignment after working all night I rushed to get dressed, washed my face, grabbed some coffee, and ran out the door to drive the hour and a half back to college to hand in the assignment. With any luck, I'd be there with 5 minutes to spare. That was enough to park and run into his office. Eventually, I was 15 minutes away and ended up getting into a major accident. I had fallen asleep on the road and woke up to the sight of my car speeding 90 kilometers an hour directly into a rock wall only a few feet in front of me. I don't even know how to describe the experience. I can barely explain it to anyone. I didn't feel afraid. I didn't think about the fact that I was about to die. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I felt like I'd gone into autopilot and that my brain was focused purely on survival. I used one arm to brace myself and one arm to shield my eyes for any glass. I felt like 1 second had gone by and the car was still. But I later learned that I'd done a complete flip without a thought, and I undid my seatbelt, opened my car door and sprinted. I'm not sure why I sprinted. I didn't think the car was going to explode or anything. I just felt like I had to run. I got about 20 feet away and just turned around and looked at the car. The front was completely smashed in, my windows were shattered, and the car was totaled. But for some reason the driver's seat was in perfect condition. If anyone had been in the passenger seat, they surely would not have lived to tell the tale. I have no doubt about that. My mind had come back to me, and I remembered that adrenaline can sometimes act as a painkiller, so I began to search my body for any injuries, but couldn't find anything but a bruise on my right shin. I even remember that I had some weed in my glove compartment that I didn't want anyone finding out about, so I ran back to the car to grab it, and was quickly able to bury it in a ditch nearby before a car even drove near it. I hadn't even realized, but I'd had my accident 3 minutes away from the hospital, and the first 3 people to stop were all nurses from that hospital. I let a lady in scrubs examine me really quick while the other person called the police, and another looked through my car to find my cell phone so I could call my family. They were in the church during the service when I called, and immediately rushed to meet me at the hospital that I was being sent to out of precaution. I mean, at least I got that extension on my project, but damn. Initially, I don't think me surviving this accident was paranormal in nature whatsoever, but my parents, being 100% religious, firmly believed that Uncle Norman protected me. I thought I was a fluke. It was just the angle in which I'd hit the rocks, but I did thank my lucky stars that I was alive though. I did still feel weird about the whole thing. I felt like I'd never even been in an accident, like it was just some dream I had, so I never really took it seriously. People asked me how it felt, but I didn't feel anything before, during, or after the accident. All emotion left my body during it. Even to this day, I don't really feel like it was me, if that makes sense. I mean, obviously I know it was me and my physical body, but it wasn't me. A few months later, my cousin had chosen me to see a medium. He was really close to my uncle who'd just passed and was curious whether he'd come through in the reading. During the reading, the medium claimed that a man named Norman was coming through and that he was his uncle, which was pretty shocking to my cousin. I wanted to believe when he told me this, but a part of me remained skeptical until the medium began talking about my accident. The medium said, "Your little cousin was in an accident during your uncle's funeral. He wants you to know that he saw it happening and was able to intervene and save her life. He says he had the help of 2 other young men." My cousin was intrigued and asked about who helped save me, and he said your uncle recognizes one of them. His name is Michael, but he didn't recognize the other man. At this point I was a believer. Michael was my cousin who'd passed away about 4 years prior. My mum and I were literally crying as our cousin told us this. I'm even tearing up now just remembering this because holy hell. Anyway, the medium had some other cool stuff to say about my uncle, and after hearing about my uncle's passing, my dad and cousin got together. They bought my uncle's favorite beer and they sat and drank as they shared stories. My uncle was always a prankster, and one of his favorite things to do was shake a can of beer and hand it to someone to open. At a certain point, they'd had 3 beers each, and as they each opened their 4th beers, the can exploded all over them, and they started crying and laughing, because it felt so much like my uncle had been playing a prank on them. The medium knew about this and said, "He's laughing as he tells me this, but he also wants you to know that he was the one who made those beers explode." The reading was just too wild. There was no way he could have known any of this. That being said, we always wondered who that 3rd young man who saved me was. I hadn't lost anyone in my life except Uncle Norm and Cousin Michael, and my grandfather, but he died an old man, not a young man in his 20s. 4 years have now passed, and it was only just today when I decided to get a tarot reading done. I had a few bucks to spare and thought I'd do it for fun. I asked about the spirit that my boyfriend and I had thought we'd seen, and I wish I'd taken a picture of the cards or remembered them better, but I do remember that I got 5 cards. One was about a soulmate, another was about a past life, another about protection, another about Mother Nature, and another about confusion. She commented on how the Mother Nature card seemed out of place, and she didn't know how to connect it to the rest of the cards, but she told me to see if I could connect it in any way later on. From this, the tarot reader gathered that the spirit I'd experienced was a confused spirit who died a long time ago and hadn't moved on, but that he was a soulmate of mine from a past life. We'd been in love, and he had died as a young man. She said that sometimes lost spirits are drawn to the souls of people that they were connected to, so even though I had no memory of him in this life, our souls are still connected. She said that his purpose was to serve as my protector while he was around and to help guide me to my true purpose. She also said that it was likely that he'd move on once he'd done that for me. She still didn't know what Mother Nature card meant, but at that point I made the connection. Around the time of the accident was also around the time I'd gone vegan, initially for environmental purposes and become an active supporter of the Green Party of Canada. And once I thought more deeply about the spirit itself, it occurred to me that I hadn't felt his presence since that time in my life. I also ended up finding out that my boyfriend at the time was cheating on me, which I felt could explain why the spirit made him feel unwelcome and fearful. Either my ghost boyfriend was jealous or he knew the guy wasn't good for me. I don't know. I just feel like everything came full circle today, and I don't know if I can call myself a skeptic anymore. I mean, I'll always be a skeptic, but this, I don't know. I guess it could be a series of super specific and amazing coincidences, but at this point, it's too unbelievable to even be a coincidence. I moved in a new house with my family 2 years ago. As soon as I walked in, I felt strange, like something wasn't right, but I tried not to pay any attention to it. The first 4 months in the new house passed without anything strange happening. Then all of a sudden one day, strange things began. That same day, my dog started crying for no reason. The iron door of the boiler room in my garden fell off, but it was perfectly sealed. The TV began switching on and off by itself. The lights would turn off without reason, and things started getting scary when I went out of my house in the garden and I saw a broken bucket full of water. There was a large crack in the bucket's surface, but something was holding the water, like it was an intact bucket. As soon as I started staring at it, the water poured out of the bucket through the crack. Since that day, strange things started happening every day. Bottles of wine opened by themselves, doors and windows closing and opening, and their hands rotating as if a person was doing it. I told my story to a friend, and she introduced me to a friend of hers that was really into this sort of thing. I borrowed an EMF meter and a device that translates EVPs to real for him, and I waited for the right time to use them. Later that day, I turned off the electricity in my house, and I went into every room of my house with the EMF meter, and I entered my bedroom and it rose up to the max level. I turned on the EVP translator and it said, "If you are here, touch this device," pointing at the EMF meter. One split second later, it rose up to the max level again, so I started talking and the words that showed up on the EVP translator were always correct responses for my questions, never a word without context. So this ghost told me she was a female, that she likes my dog, and that she's interested in knowing me. I stopped talking to her when my mum walked into the room. Since that day, I felt this ghost was following me around and trying to grab my attention by dropping objects that I was watching, causing me to get scared. She would only go away when I was with someone else. She knew that I knew she was there, that she exists, so she was searching for my company. I saw a deodorant bottle fall off a shelf in 2 movements. First it moved close to the border, then stopped, and then just fell off the shelf. I'm sure these events aren't natural. When I was home alone, I always felt like she was there with me, and every time I felt a strong sense of sadness coming from her. I don't really know how to explain it properly. It was like she was really, really sad and was transmitting her sadness to me. I began ignoring her because I was so scared, and she started to try and get my attention more and more. First, I started seeing shadows and movement out of the corner of my eye when I was alone in the house. Then one day I saw her shadow on the wall. It was so real that I thought my mum or my sister entered the room. But when I turned my head, I saw that no one was there with me, and only in that moment did I realize it was her shadow. I saw her shadow almost every day until 4 years ago when I left my parents' house and moved to a new city to go to college. She was appearing to me in a more clear way with every day. I think that if I moved out a week or 2 later, I might have even seen her directly somehow. I was always aware about the ghosts here in our house, but I want to tell you guys about a specific ghost that has been following me. I am 26 years old, bisexual, and a working individual. I live with my parents in a 1-floor townhouse and have no siblings. I am a closeted bisexual, so my parents don't know about me being gay, so I would usually introduce my ex-girlfriends as my best friends. The first girl I brought home was my college classmate. My parents grew fond of her, so she would be in my house frequently, overnights and all. At first everything was fine. Then one day we video chatted through Skype with her little brother. I used my computer in our living room so that you could see the whole living room through my cam. We were joking with each other, and she then said, "Where's your mum going?" I was confused and asked her what she was talking about. "Well, she went out the door right behind you." I laughed and said, "What are you talking about? I'm the only one in the house." I thought she was messing with me when she was aware about the ghosts in our house. Her face turned pale and she looked at her little brother. She asked her little brother if he saw a woman go behind me. He said, "Yeah." Then she kept telling me that she was serious and I shouldn't be messing with her. I told her that there's no one else in the house because they'd gone to their church gathering. She said it looked like my mum, and she swears she's not lying as her little brother saw it too. We ended the call shortly after because she was freaked out. I, on the other hand, wasn't. I shrugged it off, thinking it must be another doppelganger. Because ever since I've been a kid, I've been aware of their presences. Next few weeks, I think we had our physics class on the 4th floor. It was our last class for the day, and around 6:30 p.m. It was dark out. It was a lab with huge glass walls overseeing the middle of our school campus. It reflects a little when you look at the glass, since it was dark outside and we had lights inside the room. It's hard to explain. She was toying with my hair while waiting for our professor to get back from the lab with the lab materials for her lesson. She then stopped, and I asked why. She said that she saw a woman right behind me when she looked at our reflection in the glass. It was a split second though, so we didn't see much of it. Months passed and we eventually broke up. When I was finally working, I met another woman and we got together. I would bring her to my house too, but not that frequently, as she lives quite far away. On one occasion wherein she stayed at my house, she was silent when we were eating. I asked her if there was something wrong, but she said that she would just tell me when we were back in my bedroom. When we were finished eating, we went back and I asked her again. She told me that there was a woman peeking at us while we were eating. She was standing maybe 2 meters away from the dining table and near the stove. She saw her for a few seconds, but long enough to describe her to me. She said it was a woman dressed in white that had wavy hair. Her description fits the woman who had been haunting my dreams since I was a kid. The next encounter was when I took a bath. Before I went to take a bath, she was begging me to hurry up, so I said I wouldn't take long. I took a bath as fast as I could, so she wouldn't worry. She told me that the hanging lock on my bedroom door swung so hard, even though there was no fan or wind blowing. It was so hard that it wasn't usual. She said it stopped when I came back from the shower. There was also one encounter where we were in the office. She was a trainer, so she was having a meeting with her co-trainer in one of the rooms. Where they were talking, they were facing the opposite door. Then the door opened, so they looked towards it and saw a young woman leaving the room, which makes no sense as they're the only ones inside there, and the sliding door was heavy, so they would have heard if it had been used. It was the same woman, she says. White clothes and wavy hair. I only saw the woman in my dreams, and in one of them she'd hold my arm so hard and pulled me towards her. Not sure where she was taking me, but I would always resist. I don't know who she is, but she's been bothering whoever my partner is, not only inside my house, but in my previous school, in my office. I just wanted to share this with all of you. I'm no longer afraid, but I am deeply bothered. My name is Ali. I'm 15 years old, and if any of you can give me advice, I could really use it. My father doesn't believe in the paranormal and won't let us sage the house. We hadn't had an experience in a few months. I thought that maybe it had moved finally, but that was not the case. I've been feeling very uneasy and unsafe in my house, especially at night. 2 nights ago, I heard a young girl scream from my parents' bedroom. I stood there, trying to figure out what to do. I was home alone. Soon after, music started playing. I thought perhaps it was my phone, but it wasn't. I never found the source of the music. My parents soon arrived and I left the bathroom where I'd locked myself inside. 5 nights ago, I had a dream about a demonic young boy. He was like a dimmed grey or black. Even his skin was that color. He was wearing old, worn-out clothes and had bright, glowing yellow eyes. I saw him walking up the stairs towards me in the dream. The lights flicked around us. I screamed at him in the name of Jesus to leave me alone, and he did. He disappeared into thin air, and I woke up around 5, totally petrified from the dream because it felt so real. I checked my phone and it was around 5, and I just felt like I was being watched. So I sat there, and I had no idea what was going on outside my room. In the living room, my sister and mother were sleeping. My sister explained to me that she woke up and felt something grabbing her ankles and was terrified. She had her blanket covering her face mostly, so she couldn't see everything, but she said she did have a hole in the blanket where she saw exactly what was grabbing her. She said it was a little girl with long, dark hair, a deformed and rotting face, and a white dress. There were no eyes. She said she closed her eyes because she was too afraid to look at it anymore. Then when she woke up, again, she said she never remembered going back to sleep. But she woke up again, and she knew she was awake the other time, so she was confused. She then saw the little girl for a second time standing in the living room. Then the little girl ran into the kitchen, back and forth before she disappeared. My sister checked the time she woke up for the second time, and it was around 5 a.m. Was this a coincidence? Both waking up at 5? It could be, but I feel like it wasn't. My sister said that sometimes the ottoman in her living room, where her feet are, shake violently, and that it wasn't the first time the little girl was grabbing at her feet. A few months ago she had sleep paralysis, and that was the first time she saw the little girl. She needs a new place to sleep. Obviously the living room isn't working for her. She had a dream where a bright red light shined from the living room, and when she tried to enter, an angel threw her back and told her not to go in at night, and she woke up with an intense feeling that someone was watching her. Although I'm worried about her, I'm slightly glad that it's so violent with her and not me, because it was the other way around a little bit of time ago. I've had all this terrifying stuff, and she was getting dreams. Now I'm getting dreams, and she is having the terrifying stuff happening to her. It switched. Maybe it decided after 5 years I need a break. She's not as strong as I am, though. She doesn't know what it's like dealing with it, or how to combat it really. I grew up learning about the paranormal and dealing with experience after experience, but she never did. She just didn't want to know. After she was attacked previously, perhaps she thinks she's now an easy target. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. Here's to hoping that you enjoyed tonight's video. If you did, you know what to do. I always wonder, what is it about sage that the paranormal don't like? Does it smell bad? Does it do something? Does it make their energy all whack? I don't know. Be interesting to find out. If there's a story that you would like to share with me, you can email it to me or post it on my Reddit page. Either are fine. I'll still get it. Just, whatever it is that you'd like to do. Alright then. I think I'm going to leave it there. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.